All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Stacy Huston. Stacy, welcome. So awesome to have you today.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you and I got to give a shout out again to the folks at the podcast guest platform because those guys are doing an amazing work. You and I probably would not even have met if not for the work that those guys are doing. So I am incredibly grateful to them. And you and I, we've already spoke. We've had a chance to talk and get to know each other. And I'll tell you, we made quite the connection on our first conversation. And isn't that? I mean, that is such a testament to the power of relationships because I've known of the guys. I've been working with the guys. I've found a lot of guys and gals who have been amazing guests for this podcast through that platform. And because I've got such a great history of experience with them, I just expect more to come of that.
Yeah.
And it's just a testament to the power of relationships, which is what this podcast is all about. And so what I'd like to do is I want to start by turning it over to you, Stacy, and giving you the opportunity. I want you to be able to share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do, because you are doing some really amazing stuff that is, it's inspired me. And also, if it works, I want you to give us a little bit of backstory of how you got here, how you got into doing what you do today.
Sure. Those are a few questions, but I have
Yeah.
no problem jumping into that. So, Stacy Huston, I'm what you call a mission integration expert. And that just means that I love working with people and companies and nonprofits to really center purpose and mission and everything that they do, so that we can build better, stronger communities with greater connection, so that people feel connected to those missions, and we can make it an all-around better place. So I lead Kevin Bacon's nonprofit, and I've been doing so for about 8 years. And we really amplify change makers. We support nonprofits that are doing incredible work by connecting them to resources that they need to continue to do their day-to-day work effectively and more efficiently. And I also get to travel around the country speaking on a topic of connection and how we can use connection to really fix the issues that we are seeing run rampant in our workplaces, our families, our homes, our communities, which may not come to us as a surprise to those that are familiar with Kevin Bacon. He is kind of this quintessential tie to connection with the the pop culture phenomenon, which is the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory, which is
I think almost every entrepreneur has heard of that.
Absolutely. And it's utilized a lot. And I think that they even say it's not even 6 degrees anymore. It's probably 5 or 4 degrees. And really, we believe that everyone needs connection. They need it to thrive. They need it to survive. It's not just something that we desire. And so we get to do this work where we're creating ways for people to connect, not just virtually, which I think is also important, that people that don't have direct links to people that they feel reflect them and the values that they have or the things that they care about, maybe in their immediate community, they have a space where they can make connections with other people that have the same passions and care about the same they care about, but also creating spaces in person where people can stand side by side and do really great work together, because we feel like that's when the magic happens. And we also get to storytell. So I also am an executive producer of our top rated podcast. It's currently the #1 nonprofit podcast in the country.
Wow,
and in a few other countries. Thank you so much. And it's called 6 Degrees with Kevin Bacon. Kevin is the host. I co-host a few episodes as well, and we get to highlight different change makers from a plethora of organizations doing really, really incredible work in a variety of different causes. and the other celebrities that champion them. So they have supported them. Either they founded these nonprofits or they just got plugged in. Some of them found them online on social media and said, wow, this is really great work. I want to lend my voice and my support and my finances and my resources. And they do just that. And so we've invited them on the podcast to talk a little bit more and shine a great old light on the work that they're doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
a lot of stuff, doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And you shared something with, because I can't remember if I told you this, but I know in 2008, my family, my wife and I, we started the Thompson Family Foundation. And I would like to say that I had some big, noble vision for this at the time. I did not, Stacy. My business was doing really well that year, and it was growing like crazy. And I honestly, I was looking for a tax break.
Yeah.
And I ended
like so many, right?
And I started this family foundation, and I was able. We've got it done, got our tax-free status, and before the end of the year in 2008, I was able to make a big, huge donation into that foundation. That when you put that money there, it goes in tax-free, and so I didn't have to give it to Uncle Sam. I got it, put it in there. And the following spring, my wife gets a letter from the organization. It was the Stewardship Institute who helped us set that up. They sent my wife a letter, sent us a letter. My wife opened it about a workshop they were doing for a bunch of family foundation owners to come together and just share experiences. And my wife showed it to me. She goes, I want to go to this. And I'm like, yeah, you should definitely go to that. And she goes, I wasn't clear. She goes, I want us to go to this. And so we did. We went to this workshop, and there was probably about 50 family foundation people there, all families who were running nonprofits. And they were sharing just their experiences of what they were doing through their foundations. And I'm going to tell you, Stacy, I felt like such a schmuck. I was like, oh my gosh, you were looking for a tax break, but look at all these people and look what they're doing with their family foundation. I said, I want to experience that. Mm-hmm. And that was back in the spring of 2009. And I will tell you now, we have done as a family so many amazing things through our family foundation. I have 7 children. I have 6 grandchildren. We've got our entire family involved in doing stuff. We've got an orphanage in Jamaica that we go visit. We've been supporting them for years. My wife kind of championed that whole thing. And, but you shared something on our last conversation when we were talking that, you don't have to start a foundation. You don't have to start a nonprofit. You don't have to go, because there's some logistics involved in running that. And of course, my family foundation is kind of small compared to what you guys. There's a lot more logistics in running what you do, but you gave some really good advice, and I want you to reiterate that here for anybody because I think it's really valuable.
Sure thing. And thank you for being honest about like that learning curve and where you started and where you, I wouldn't say finish, you're continuing this work. And so I think it's really important to be honest about that and have those honest conversations about our motivations and how they sometimes change over time. But yes, so often I get asked, should I start a nonprofit or should I start a social enterprise? And I say, well, why do you want to start a nonprofit? And usually it's like, well, I really care about this issue and I have a lot of really good ideas on how to fix it. I'm like, okay, have you sat on a board of a nonprofit? Do you, are there other organizations that are doing this similar work that you've spent time with, you've volunteered at, you've supported them financially in some type of way? And sometimes it's yes, but oftentimes it's no. It's just something that they feel really passionate about, which is wonderful. And it's great that that is where they're starting from. But there are so many existing organizations that are doing incredible work. And I always say the first thing you want to do is see what else is out there currently and see if you can lend some insight, attention, resources, funding to those existing organizations. And if you don't, sometimes you might want to ask yourself, is it really that you're seeking control? do you think that you're the smartest person in the room?
Yeah.
You're likely not, but you
Uh-huh.
may think that, right? And maybe there's other ways that you can come about it. You can build a cohort. You can help to lead a team. I found myself really inspired back in 2020 around the cause of, the foster care system and the great need in the foster care system. However, I had never experienced foster care. I was not a foster parent. So I wasn't really the voice of someone that should be leading an organization in that type of movement. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, am I the right person to be leading something in that type of way? So instead, I joined a group of thought leaders and experts and social workers and people that were touched by foster care much more closely. And I kind of helped strategize with them on ways to grow this movement that they were trying to build. So I was able to lend the strategy experience that I had, right? But ensuring that I wasn't co-opting a space that really wasn't mine to take.
Yeah.
But there are so many wonderful organizations, and I never want to discourage people from wanting to take that leap. And sometimes sometimes starting a nonprofit is the right, next step. But I think there should be a lot more due diligence on the front end, a lot more conversations to be had. If nothing else, because you can learn so much before you jump in and expend a lot of resources and time. And those resources are all the more critical because there's less of them. More than 30% of nonprofits fail in the first 5 years, I believe. And so that goes to show that there's just not a lot of sustainability in these newer ones that are popping up. So how can we, bridge the gap a little bit more and have greater impact with our resources?
Yeah. Okay. Really, really great advice. So now that we've set a little bit of context and the listeners know, a little bit about you and what inspires you most, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of our listeners. So Stacy, have you ever met or been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Absolutely. I want to kind of start with, prefacing. I think that our lives are made up of a series of moments that are just, strung together. And there are lots of people that can make seemingly huge impacts from very big actions, for lack of better words. And also people that can make such an impact from something that is seemingly very, very small. And so when I think about this question, I really almost think of it in those two separate ways. First and foremost, I would be nowhere if it wasn't for my mother. And I think a lot of people think about their parents when they think about this question, for good or for bad, right? I think our parents and our upbringing have a tendency to shape so much of who we are and what we become that you'd be remiss to never acknowledge that either way. But my mom was just a relentless advocate for connection. My mom always said yes, always was there for people. She had this ability for hospitality that I think transcends anything that you see nowadays. And also this really unique ability to forgive people. And I had seen throughout her life a lot of hurt, a lot of harm come her way, and her ability to forgive people came so natural. I think a lot of that was from her faith that she had that shaped so much of who she was. But a lot of people of faith sometimes still really struggle with the actual acting out of forgiveness more so than just the words and what that looks like. And because she poured herself into her children in such a way, I saw such a deep empathy. And so growing up, I didn't I didn't always love how emotional I would become with things that were seemingly sad, you know?
Okay.
But I know that that was a deep empathy that was imparted on me from my mother, which was why she was so able to forgive. And so why it was so easy for her to lean into connection with people, because she knew the power of it. That when she connected with people, it made it so much easier to have empathy and understanding with someone else and to build relationships that were really meaningful. Even if it wasn't comfortable, even if it wasn't convenient, she was the type of person that just modeled fully how we should be if we want to have really healthy communities and interactions with people. So first and foremost, I would say that she really laid the groundwork, which, became the foundation of my entire career,
Yeah.
but really my life in terms of how I think about my relationships. I don't have many surface level relationships with people. In fact, it's hard for me to have relationships with people that you can't really get past the surface with, because it's so obvious that something is missing, something really critical in making a healthy relationship. And so that is just a testament to who she was and how she lived her life. And she's no longer with us, but that is a legacy that she has left, for the world through her children. And I'm so grateful for that. And then when I think about the second part of kind of my answer in those seemingly small interactions and people that have given me an opportunity, when I lost my mother, it was very sudden. And there was a neighbor of mine that I did not know well at all. We had just kind of moved in, COVID had hit. There had been some interactions on walks when you're outside, the 6 feet apart. But she saw a post that I had made on Facebook about my mother's death, and she had lost her father.
Oh, wow.
And so she reached out to me and said that she can really relate. And so what does that tell you? Empathy. She had true empathy because she understood, she had been there. And she said, I'd love to just come over and sit with you outside, 6 feet apart. We can wear our masks, but I think it's important that you're not alone. And I said yes. And that's the other part of connection, is that you have to be open to receiving connection from others and not shut down from that. And she came over, sat at the end of my driveway. I sat at the top, and we just cried together, and didn't say a whole lot of words at all. And I never really told her how meaningful that was to me, but it really, man, it touched me in such a deep, profound way. And when you go through something hard in life, right? And let's face it, like, we're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening today. You're building your business. They're made up of people, right? People that are grieving, people that are going through serious struggles, mental health crisis, sometimes very joyful moments too that need celebrating. But there's just, it runs the gamut. These are people, and people all need space to be fully who they are, fully recognized for who they are, but also the space to just be sometimes.
Yeah.
And she provided that for me. She provided a really, really safe space where she didn't ask for anything back. And what I did notice during that time was that there were a lot of people that just didn't show up. And I don't blame that or even harbor any ill feelings, but sometimes the people that you expect to be there for you just can't be there.
Yeah.
It might be their own things that they're struggling with. It might just be because they don't have the words, but it's often because they're avoiding something that's really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear people say things like, I just didn't want to say the wrong thing and then upset you. And I didn't know how to, not talk about your mother, and all of these very well-meaning things. But at the end of the day, I think it's about us avoiding the discomfort
Mm-hmm.
And we have, as a species, really leaned in to convenience and being comfortable and getting things very quick. And we can compartmentalize anything in this world, and our feelings and our emotions. And so I have kind of made it my purpose in life to work with companies, to work with nonprofits, to work with individuals, and really help them to see that they have to lean in to the discomfort.
Yeah.
That the only way, through something is directly, in the midst of it. You have to lean in. And when we do that, we build healthier communities,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of ways that you can just practice being present. I think that's what it comes down to, is like looking for opportunities to show up for people, and then doing it and taking that action, not waiting for someone to say, I need you, but starting to come up with daily practices where you're saying, okay, for 30 minutes today, I'm going to spend some time reaching out, connecting to people, looking for people that I can support. Maybe it's your neighbor across the street and it's trash day and their trash is still at the end, but it's empty. How nice would it be for you to pull it up the driveway for them? Or you offer to walk someone's dog, right? On a cold day for, one of your neighbors that are maybe elderly. There's so many options and things that could present so easily to us that we just avoid, right? Because we don't need to do it. No one's asked us to do it, but these little interactions in our life help people to, one, feel more connected with their community. It helps us with our mental health. It helps us with our well-being. It makes us healthier individuals as the givers. Like, there's so many studies that talk about the science behind servant attitudes and service work and volunteerism. And there's so many different ways to plug this into your life.
Mm-hmm.
But when we avoid it, it's really at our own detriment.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work at 6 Degrees is around creating these types of opportunities for companies. We have a workforce that 68% in the United States are disengaged. There's this epidemic of quiet quitting and people just looking for what's next. And really, it's a lot of waste. We're talking about, somewhere on estimates of 450 to 550 billion dollars of economic loss for US companies alone. And if you look globally, we're talking about the trillions. It's something that can be avoided. And I think that when you look at nonprofits, or you look at volunteerism as a cost, a hindrance, something that is like taking away from your company and your workforce in some type of way, what you're really missing is the value and the true value proposition that working with nonprofits brings to a company.
Yeah.
When we get back to kind of that original thing I shared about being a mission integration expert, when companies are clear on their mission and what drives them, and also how they're making a social impact in their communities around them, employees are happier, they're more engaged when they can see how they're not just coming in for a 9 to 5, but their work is actively helping the greater world around them.
Yeah.
This is showing better engagement, greater fulfillment in your job. You're attracting better employees. There's just so much to be gained from these types of relationships. And so it's my hope that I can work with more nonprofits to help them to position themselves as the true value proposition that they are to corporate partners, and for corporate partners to really understand that this isn't something that's just a check off on your CSR, that it's actually a real tool for them to utilize in order to affect their bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. This is really powerful stuff. So have you, I'm just curious, because, when you talked about your mom, I lost my mom quickly and unexpectedly too. It's been a while, so there's a lot of healing that's taken place. We lost our mom, my brother and I, in 1997. But I'll tell you, and my dad had already passed away. Dad passed away when I was just 16, and so losing mom, my brother and I we got to just deal with everything after the fact, and just that was an experience in itself, and fortunately we had some people around us that were just there for us, that just it was so I am so grateful and appreciative to those people who knew my parents well, and that were there for us, and it made it so much easier, And so I'm curious, have this neighbor of yours, are you guys, do they still live next to you and all that?
No, we've since moved.
Okay.
And she and I think unfortunately her and her partner have split up. And so we haven't really spoken. I think that sometimes, similarly, it's some hardship. You can reach out to somebody, but if they're not ready to kind of talk about things, it takes some time.
Yep.
But this conversation definitely makes me want to reach out to her once more and just to check in, because I do think that she deserves to know the impact that she had, at least on my life, and how it helped me really to shape some of my ethos, I think, moving forward, and wanting to be really intentional with how we show up for people that we know and people that we don't know.
You bet. Absolutely. So I've got one other question that I want to ask. And so, you've talked about your relationship with your mom. You've talked about this relationship with your neighbor and how that impacted you. So if you look at either one of these two relationships, what is an example of how that carried over into your life that then empowered you to also make a big impact on other people? And just what is one, and it can be with either person. It can be with your mom, it could be as a result of your relationship with your neighbor and what took place there. But what's an example where, because of that relationship, it empowered you to just do whatever that was, and that would have never happened if not for this relationship?
Absolutely. When I think about my mom, that's the most immediate that comes to mind. And this ability for her to always show up and be there for people. If someone asked her something, can you help with this? Can you bake 10 turkeys for the church for Thanksgiving or whatever it was? She's like, yeah, I can do that. So much so that I actually started a Instagram page. This is probably like a decade ago, called Stacy Says Yes. And it was really about how, like, I said yes to like everything. And an example of that would be when I was leading a chamber of commerce. I was on the executive committee for the local chamber, running the Emerging Leaders Council there. And I had thrown an event, and a gentleman had joined by the name of Ashwood, and he was talking about TED. And this was like, TED had been around for a while, but I still think it wasn't nearly as much on like the radar as it is where everywhere you look, it's like TED Talks. And he had said he had just attended a TEDx event in, Washington, D.C., and it was incredible. And he said, do you like TED? I was like, I love TED. Simon Sinek is one of my favorite TED Talks. And he said, would you want to start one with me? I didn't even know this person. This is the first time I was meeting them. And I said, yeah, sure. Right. Because I just said yes to things. And then I figured it out. Right. And, a decade later, we have, had something like 11 events, and we have produced more than 50 TEDx talks and have tens of millions of views of our videos and content. And many of our speakers went on and were featured on TED's homepage. And it's incredible. And I became a producer for them, and I oversaw all of the speaker selection and coached the speakers on their talks and how to really get their idea across. And one of the things that I always employed was this: okay, I know you want to talk about X, but let's talk a little bit more about your history. Like, let's get to know you a little bit more. Like, tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your work in a greater way. And so often these talks would shift ever so gently and start including things that reach from a deeper place. And that's when the magic really happened. And like that skill set was really something that my mom modeled. Um, and she would always say, like, I can't believe you do this. I could never do these things that you do. And I'm like, you have done them. You just, you know what I mean? You haven't done them on this type of stage,
Mm-hmm.
but like you're
Mm-hmm.
playing on the world stage,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't dismiss these seemingly small things that you do, because they, I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now, Kevin. You know, that's it came from this gift that she had given me, that she didn't even realize that she was bestowing upon me.
Yeah.
So yeah, this TEDx organization was formed, and because of that, we created our first 501c3 to kind of manage that, and we managed some, you know, day of about 100 volunteers, but year round about 12 on our core team. But
Okay.
it operated like a business, you know, with like no one being paid. But it taught me so much. And so when a friend of mine came to me a couple years after and said, hey, Kevin Bacon's organization is looking for a new executive director, you know, I think that you would be great for it. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know anything about nonprofits. And she's like, what are you talking about? You run a nonprofit. You, you sit on these boards for these nonprofits. Like, you've been in business and sales. Like, what do you think fundraising is, you know? And I'm like, like never computed. And so I took the interview and, you know, obviously eventually met Kevin, and he kind of was like, what do you want to do with this thing? What do you think we can do to really grow 6degrees.org and make it something that is really leans into connection and community? And we have had so much fun ever since. But I would have never taken that step of belief, you know, had I not felt like I was prepared. And I was only prepared because I learned how to say yes, to step
Yeah.
outside of my comfort zone, to sometimes say I'm going to do it even though I don't think I'm ready, or I don't have the experience, and I was going to figure it out. And I did figure it out. And we
Yeah.
all have that capability.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Since meeting you, I've been watching Kevin Bacon videos online and stuff,
Sure.
and I just love who he is and how he shows. I mean, I've always loved. I mean, I've seen so many of his movies, but I saw this one. It was a quick short. It was less than 2 minutes, and he had his horses with him and stuff, you know. And he was just talking about this thing he was doing, and he's like, hey, I want you to get involved in this with me, and just the way he was just and the way he was interacting with his horses and playing the guitar, and then the horse started like strumming his guitar with him and stuff, you know. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, an example of just showing up and just being a you know. And when we are that way, you know, I mean, the right people, they just get attracted to us,
Yeah.
you know. And you know, I think I probably told you when we talked before, you know, we just released the 199th episode of this podcast today. And I this has been hands down, hosting this podcast has been hands down the most rewarding thing I've done in my 28 years as an entrepreneur. And it has exponentially impacted everything I was already doing. And I get to connect and have conversations with some amazing entrepreneurs, amazing people making such an impact in this world. And and just I get to be of service to them. And it allows me to just show up and be me and just show up in a way that I want to show up. And it's an absolutely amazing experience. And you know, for anybody that's listening to this and going, man, Kevin, I really like Stacy. I like what Stacy stands for. I like what she's all about. How can they find out more info on the work that you're doing and any websites, any resources that we can share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, you can head to 6degrees.org. That's all spelled out. SIXDEGREES.org. You can see all of the work that we're doing there. We're also across socials, Instagram and Twitter at 6 Degrees of KB, as in Kevin Bacon. And then you can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook as well at 6degrees.org. We would love to be connected with you and share a little bit. We don't drill the inboxes, but we definitely send out a monthly newsletter so you know where we're showing up when there's volunteer activities. Sometimes Kevin participates, which is always really exciting for our volunteers and our supporters. To kind of get information on that, you can text the word mission to 33777. And that's the word mission, MISSION, to 33777. And then, I'm also the CEO of Entertain Change, which is a social impact agency where I help thought leaders and change makers share their stories. I also help brands and corporate partners really think through their mission, their core values, and how to ensure that their workforce is on board for all the good things that are up ahead. So you can find more about that at entertainchange.us. But I would love to hear from you all and connect with you. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be with you, Kevin. So thank you so much for asking me to join today.
Absolutely. And this was an amazing experience, and thank you for taking the time to have this conversation today. I am really excited to get this out there and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs, because on that side of this, for the guests like you that I get to interview, I love giving you the opportunity to share your story and your experience around this topic of relationships and honor some people that have had such a profound impact on your life. Then also for the listeners, who they too are entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs, by sharing this, we get to inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And Stacy, with your help today, we definitely delivered on that. And so thank you so much. I just really appreciate you, and excited to get this episode out there and share it with others.
Same here, Kevin. It's my pleasure.